Welcome to Beyond the Wheeze, the podcast where real stories meet expert insight on asthma and other chronic respiratory conditions. I'm your host, Josh Rayon, asthma advocate and patient voice. Each week, we explore the challenges, progress, and possibilities shaping respiratory care. Through conversations with patients, clinicians, and changemakers, we shine a light on what it means to live and breathe better. This is Beyond the Wheeze. Today, I'm excited to welcome Annelise Bauer, the founder of In-Bodied, to the show. Annelise is a respiratory wellness practitioner who specializes in conscious breathing techniques and mindful movement to help people connect with their bodies, calm their nervous systems, and support their overall health. Her work is grounded in a philosophy that emphasizes the mind-body connection, balance and integration, self-empowerment, and holistic healing. One of her core specialties is Buteyko breathing, a method shown to benefit people with chronic respiratory conditions, including asthma. Through her practice, Annelise helps people regulate their breathing patterns, reduce symptoms, and build a healthier relationship with their breath. Today, we'll explore a range of breathing techniques, including Buteyko and yoga-based practices, and how these approaches can support people living with respiratory illnesses and improve overall health and well-being. With all that being said, Annelise, welcome to Beyond the Wheeze.
Thank you so much, Josh. Super excited to be here and talking about the breath.
As I mentioned earlier, before we hit record, we both had the flu, so we had to reschedule this a couple of times. I'm glad you got through this. I'm glad I got through this. It seems like everyone's going through it at the moment. So thank you for being open to rescheduling this a couple times. I'd like to hop into it and start with the journey to breathwork. Your work focuses on conscious breathing and mindful movement. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What inspired you to dedicate your career really to this kind of work?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with asthma when I was 7 and relied on daily steroids, rescue inhalers. I did gymnastics growing up until I was 18. And anytime we had to do, a bunch of cardio, they'd be like, all right, take your inhaler preemptively because otherwise you're going to be unwell. I couldn't really, I had concentration issues in school and never slept well. I thought it was actually normal to wake up like 20 billion times a night for most of my life, but turns out it's not. So it was about 6 years ago when I realized a lot of these issues I was having was actually related to my breathing. And so in my early 20s, my breathing was at its worst it ever really was. On a daily basis, I was scared to go to sleep at night because I thought it might stop breathing. I couldn't really get a satisfying breath in. My chest was tight, and I developed really severe anxiety. Couldn't really figure out what I was anxious about, but it was definitely my breathing. Sort of creates this vicious cycle. Like I knew I was anxious about it, but I didn't really connect the two together until I eventually realized I have to do something about this because I'm so anxious, I can't breathe, and I'm unwell, and it's COVID. It was COVID, like peak COVID time during that time. So I just started doing some research and heard about acupuncture as a method of helping asthma. So I started going to an acupuncturist. At the same time, I started reading the book Breath by James Nestor, which is an excellent book if you haven't read it. It kind of talks about just the basics of breathing and how important nasal breathing is. So I, knew nasal breathing was important, but didn't really know. And started doing some breathing exercises from that book. And he actually, I was kind of rereading it recently and realized that he actually talks about Buteyko in the book, which totally makes sense, but I forgot about that. So anyway, I started to understand kind of more about my breathing and that my anxiety was linked and my sleep was linked and my concentration issues were linked. So I started doing the breathing exercises, and between that and the acupuncture, I started to get a lot better. My my breathing started to ease, my anxiety started to ease. And it wasn't, 100% better, obviously. And I was kind of teaching myself, but kind of fast forward some years, I started wanting to help other people do this. And that's kind of how I ended up getting into Buteyko and learned a lot more about breathing from that certification. And that's kind of how I ended up here.
Many people think of breathing as something that's automatic, but your practice treats it as something intentional and powerful. Why is breath so central to our physical and our mental well-being?
Yeah. So breathing is the only autonomic function we can consciously control. So it's the bridge between our conscious and our unconscious systems. So every breath literally directly affects our nervous system, our CO2 and oxygen balance, our heart rate, digestion, our mental state, our sleep. So in an ideal world, our autonomic breathing is optimal. Ideally, we are breathing optimally, but unfortunately, it's not really the case for a lot of people. And a lot of it has to do actually with our modern way of living. We're sitting all day in bad posture, looking down at our phones. Like if you just try that, looking down and then trying to take a big breath, like you're not going to be able to fully expand your diaphragm and your lungs. We're not moving enough. A lot of the foods we eat can change the pH balance in our body, and that can change our breathing as well. And we're also very stressed as a society. So all of these things can kind of lead to dysfunctional breathing patterns. So it could be that we're mouth breathing all the time or over breathing. If we are mouth breathing, we are over breathing. Chest breathing, so not breathing from our diaphragm, more breathing up here. And this creates a lot of issues. So it creates a disruption in our CO2 levels, where you might be breathing off too much CO2 if we're over breathing. Reduced oxygen to the tissues, chronic stress response activation, so the sympathetic nervous system, which is our like fight or flight nervous system. And obviously that is not leaving us in a very good state. And it just creates this vicious cycle, right? So when we make our breathing intentional, we can really reclaim that agency, or our physiology is kind of how I like to think of it. And it's not that we want to be thinking about breathing all the time, because we don't want to be thinking about our breathing all the time. We have to live. But it's more that if we are not breathing optimally, we want to get to a place where our natural breathing is automatic, and automatic in a good way, and functioning well for us. So by making your breathing intentional during certain periods of your day, maybe every hour you take a little bit of time, maybe once a day, for 20 minutes, you start to train that automatic functioning of your breathing to be more optimal.
One breathing technique I've heard a lot about, especially hosting this podcast and having various clinicians and other patients on as well, is Buteyko breathing, and how Buteyko breathing is one of the sole breathing techniques that you can use as an asthmatic to help your respiratory system. And I think, COPD as well, and I'm sure other lung illnesses. Can you speak a little bit about Buteyko breathing and how it became part of your primary focus?
Yeah, definitely. So Buteyko breathing is basically a breathing re-education method developed by Dr. Buteyko about 70 years ago. So quite a while ago. It's been around. And the core principle is that many chronic conditions stem or are comorbid with chronic hyperventilation, so breathing too much. And when people think of hyperventilation, I think they often think of like someone having a panic attack and really obviously hyperventilating, but people can be hyperventilating all the time. And you might not even notice it. So it can be kind of subtle. And when we overbreathe, as I mentioned, we exhale too much CO2, which makes it harder for oxygen to actually reach our tissues, and our cells and everything that needs our brain, everything that needs our oxygen. So breathing more air doesn't really mean we're getting more oxygen to our blood and our cells. So Buteyko teaches the main principle of it is reduced volume breathing, nasal breathing 24/7, day and night, and breath holds to help normalize CO2 levels and also raise CO2 tolerance. Because when we have a low CO2 tolerance, which means we are hypersensitive to an increase of CO2, we're more likely to be hyperventilating. And yeah, the main goal is restoring efficient breathing patterns. It's also very relaxing and stress relieving, which helps as well. And it's gentle. It's nothing, super crazy or anything like that. So it definitely, like we were talking about, consistency is super important. And in the programs I teach, it could be around 5 weeks. I find a little bit longer than that to be more helpful. And it has to be practiced every day for sure. So how it became kind of part of my focus was I actually, once I, had to kind of help my own breathing, I was traveling and I discovered conscious connected breathwork, which is more like the cathartic breathwork. And I still teach that. It's an amazing modality, really cool somatic work. But a lot of people aren't ready for that, whether mentally or physically. And it's definitely not going to help you with your breathing patterns. In fact, if you already have not so good breathing patterns, it would definitely make it worse. So I realized, I really want to help people breathe better. The cathartic breathwork is super cool, but it's not helping people breathe better. So that's how I found Buteyko, and then helped my asthma and my anxiety even more. So super thankful for Buteyko. It's really amazing. And it helps with the, natural breathing patterns. And then there's also exercises for like emergency when you start to feel symptoms come up. There's exercises for that as well, which I find really, really cool.
These methods don't just support respiratory health, but also stress reduction and overall nervous system regulation, if I'm correct.
Yeah, because it's also connected too,
So I'd like to move on now to demonstration and a practical guidance. So if you don't mind, many of our listeners may have never heard or tried a structured breathing exercise before. Would you be able to walk us through a short demonstration of, I guess, a Buteyko breathing exercise they can follow along with safely at home? And I can do it right here on the camera as well for our viewers.
I definitely can. We will do the feather breathing or reduced volume breathing exercise. I also don't do it if you're pregnant or if you have any serious medical conditions. But if you're ready, we can give it a go. Before we start, though, I will say it's a reduced volume, so we're going to be breathing a little bit less. And you might feel a little bit of air hunger or the sensation that you want to breathe more. This is what you should feel. It's normal. And you might feel like a little tension in the diaphragm. But if you start to notice involuntary contractions of the diaphragm where you're kind of like tensing, this would indicate that you're breathing a little bit too less.
Something tells me a lot of our listeners here are going to be quite familiar with air hunger and whatnot behind it. So hopefully there's a benefit to that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you start to feel it becomes a little too intense, just take a break for like 30 seconds. It'll be around like 4 to 5 minutes. We'll do. So you can close your eyes or cast your gaze downwards, or you can keep your eyes open, straight ahead, whatever feels good for you. And just imagine there's a piece of string pulling you upwards from the top of the back of your head towards the ceiling, lengthening the distance between your navel and your sternum, widening the space between your ribs, create a tall, open posture. And placing your finger underneath your nose so you can monitor the airflow from your nostrils. This will provide you with immediate feedback about your breathing. So just bringing your attention to the airflow on your finger. Can you feel the warm air as it flows onto your finger? There's no need to focus on the movement of your chest or your abdomen. Instead, just concentrate solely on the airflow against your finger. Really immerse yourself in the sensation of the warm air as it leaves your nostrils and brushes against your finger. As you feel the warm air on your finger, gently slow down your breathing. And take a soft breath in through your nose. And a gentle, prolonged exhalation. Breathing so softly that you can hardly feel any air blowing onto your finger. Imagine your finger is a feather and your breathing is so light, the feather doesn't even flutter. Gradually slow the speed of the air leaving your nostrils. Your goal is to slow your breathing to the point where you feel almost no air on your finger. There's no need to hold your breath or intentionally restrict your breathing. It's important not to interfere with your breathing muscles, so instead just allow your breathing to soften by concentrating on the warm air as it flows onto your finger. The more warm air you feel on your finger, the harder you're breathing. So can you quiet and soften your breathing to the extent that you hardly feel any air on your finger? Volume of air should be a little bit less than when you began. We should feel tolerable need for air, subtle urge to inhale more. As you reduce the volume of air you breathe, it's normal to experience a slight tension. You need to take a break. We can always do that, always listening to your body. With consistent practice of this exercise, the goal is to maintain a tolerable sense of air hunger for 4 to 5 minutes. And as we take a few final breaths, doing this exercise, just noticing warm air blowing onto your finger. And a slight coolness as you breathe in. And whenever you're ready, opening your eyes if they were closed. Recentering yourself with the space around you. And turning your breathing to normal.
Very meditative, almost like doing
Yes.
mindfulness at the same time. Well, thank you so much for demonstrating that for us. And I should have pointed out before, if you're driving, listening to this podcast, keep your eyes open, look straight ahead. Don't
Yes.
close them. I mean, that's self-explanatory. Save this episode and listen to it later. We'll go through that again. I really enjoyed that. It's something I'm definitely going to have to practice a little bit, which brings me into my next question. So for somebody new to breath work, myself admittedly, especially someone living with asthma or another chronic respiratory condition, what's the best and safest way to get started?
Yeah, I would say start slowly. Don't force anything that feels incredibly uncomfortable. Just the breathing exercise we were just doing, it's a tolerable air hunger. We shouldn't feel like we're suffocating. Um, and there's so many different kinds of breath work. And I think this is kind of something that's not really said enough, honestly. Like I was talking about the cathartic breath work, that's so different than this kind of breath work. So it's just so vast. So I would focus on, what are your goals with the breath work? Do you want to relax? Do you want to help your breathing? Do you want to, have a cathartic experience? And that will kind of determine on what kind of breath work you should do. But for those with, respiratory issues, I would definitely say educating yourself on dysfunctional breathing is really important. Lots of people, don't even know there's a right way or a wrong way to breathe. I definitely didn't before. So, and then becoming aware of your breathing pattern. Are you chest or belly breathing? Are you breathing fast or slow, heavy? Can you hear your breathing? Can other people hear your breathing? Are you holding your breath? Something I find really interesting is oftentimes when people are concentrating on the computer, they do this thing called screen apnea. And it is basically where you hold your breath while you're focusing on something, oftentimes the computer. And I actually did a session with a group of people at university a few months ago. And I asked them all, do you guys do this? Do you notice yourself holding your breath? And they were like, yeah, I definitely do that. Never really thought about it, but I definitely do. So becoming aware of things like that is so important as well. And then just nasal breathing all the time. But also just working with a trained instructor if possible. This can just help a lot with consistency, what you should really be doing. Because as I said, all breathing exercises are the same. It can be kind of confusing. How often should I do it? How much? Which ones? And just, for safety and accountability, I think working with an instructor is really a good call.
Yeah, those are good tips. Yeah, similar to, working with a clinician, when you need medicine or a standard medicinal approach, I guess, you kind of want to listen to your instructor. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you could be doing something that's just really not helpful.
How does improving breathing patterns impact mental health and emotional regulation?
Yeah. So as we were talking about, the anxiety before, your breathing pattern kind of is your emotional state. They're hard to separate, really. If you think about anxiety, for example, anxiety can create rapid, shallow breathing. And the reverse is also true. Rapid, shallow breathing can create anxiety. So it is definitely hard to separate them. And by, consciously slowing and deepening your breath, you are sending safety signals to your brain. And your body feels that. You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and your digest. So you really are telling your nervous system we're safe. And you can tell your mind that all you want, but if your body doesn't feel it, you're not going to feel it. So I think it can just really give you a lot of agency during, panic or overwhelm or stress. You have those tools to work with them in real time, and then also just creating that baseline of proper breathing as well. So when, you're really stressed, you're already there. You're already better than you would be otherwise.
You find that people living with chronic respiratory conditions experience improvements beyond their breathing, for example, better sleep, reduced anxiety. I mean, we talked about that already. But increased energy, is that something that you find that there is a difference?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can speak for myself and definitely lots of other people as well that even, if you're not breathing well, you are likely not sleeping as well as you could be, which is inherently going to make your energy during the day not as high as it could be. But also, if you think about it, the better you're breathing, the more oxygen you're getting to your brain, the more energy you're going to have, the more mental clarity you're going to have. Um, Digestion as well, if we're talking about the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. If we're in the sympathetic all the time, our body's not able to do that rest and digest, right? For the parasympathetic, our body is resting, it's digesting. It's just everything is going to function better. Obviously, yeah, increased athletic performance, another benefit. We can breathe better. We can generally do exercise better. So what else? Yeah, I would say those are the main. Reduced inflammation too. We're, not breathing as well. We're just creating more inflammation in the body.
A big part of your philosophy is self-empowerment, helping people take control of their health. How can patients advocate for themselves and integrate breathwork alongside traditional medical care?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I mean, educating yourself is huge. Reading, taking classes, working with practitioners, as well as tracking your progress. I do this for my clients as well with a tracking system, because it's helpful to see that uh, kind of, graph. Oh, I'm getting better. My breath holds are getting better. I can hold my breath for longer. And my symptoms are also improving. So I think just kind of paying attention to that and communicating with your doctor as well, sharing what's working. Maybe you start a program with breathwork and you find that you are breathing better, which is the goal, obviously. And then maybe you talk to your doctor and, maybe they can reevaluate your medication use and kind of trying things out. I know when I started kind of taking things into my own hands, I may have took them a little too far. But it worked out for me. I don't necessarily recommend this. I think we talked about this before. But I stopped, all my medication altogether because my doctor wouldn't listen to me, and wouldn't, I don't know, was not convinced whatsoever that anything besides steroids was going to help, even despite the clear evidence that it was working. So I'm a little bit stubborn. So I think I could have communicated a little better with my doctor and advocated for myself a little bit more. And maybe we could have worked together a little bit more. But all that being said, it's so important to integrate the breathwork alongside, not instead of, your medical care. It really can go so well hand in hand together. And then just trusting your body's feedback too. Like when I started, I said, wow, this is really working. I'm really feeling a lot better. Let me dive into this more. And then also just being patient with the process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be like taking your emergency inhaler and immediately feeling a difference. It's going to take some time. But yeah, I think a really amazing way to think about breathwork is sort of like an added powerful self-management tool. You can use it anytime, anywhere. Just like you were saying, you used some breathwork exercise during a meeting. It's like nobody can tell you were doing it. You felt better afterwards. It's an amazing use in that case.
Those are all really good points. And you mentioned too, don't do what I do. I stopped taking my medications. but then realize afterwards that, they do work well together. It does go hand in hand, having your approach with breath work and medicine at the same time. Can't admit that I'm totally guilty of doing the same thing. And that's when I got into running. And I mean, you said with breath work, you have to be consistent. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight to see those improvements. I can compare that 100% to running or doing cardiovascular exercise as an asthmatic, especially. You're going to be winded. You're going to have to take your inhaler a lot, but eventually you're going to go for your first 5K run without taking your inhaler once. It's not going to happen overnight, but put yourself towards that, dive into it, be consistent, and you're going to get there over time. But yes, certainly do not stop taking your medication regardless. I mean, because you don't really, when you're on it, you have Dr. Kaplan brought this up on his episode, and it was really simple, but it made perfect sense. When you're on your medicine and you're feeling good, you think that I really don't need my medicine. I can kind of push this out a little bit, but 9 times out of 10, I would say it's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. That being said, I have been off daily steroids for at least 6 years now, and
That's
I
terrific.
have not felt the need to go back. And I definitely credit the dedication to breathwork and also taking things out of my life that were triggers too. Like I have a dog and I'm allergic to the dog, so I take allergy meds. That helps a lot. I am really careful about what like toxins are in my house. And, from laundry detergent to candles. Candles are like a huge trigger for most people with asthma and most people in general. I think a lot of people don't realize that, but there's so many chemicals in our society and in our houses, and just eliminating those things can help so much.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the simple things, and that's where my story started. Is I grew up in a house built in 1867 with dust mites, farm animals, dogs, cats. There was burning apple orchards right by my house, and all of those things were direct triggers for to my lungs. And when I finally left after years and years and years of struggling and being in the hospital, and I really took all of those triggers almost instantaneously away, it was unreal. It's like for a little bit of time, I felt like I didn't have asthma. I have asthma at the time. I did, but it helped me that much that I could, for the first time in my life, manage it. So you're absolutely right. Try to remove other triggers in your life, and then maybe your dependency to medication can change a little bit, again, with the proper guidance and being overseen by practitioners and whatnot. But combining it with something like breath work is terrific, and it's going to strengthen those lungs.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up, Annelise, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners, perhaps upcoming programs, resources, or advice for someone curious about breathwork and unsure really where to start?
I guess we've kind of covered the advice portion, but just really amazing to work with a coach who knows what kind of exercises would be helpful for you. And definitely, again, recommend the book Breath by James Nestor to just kind of understand things a little better. And then as far as my programs go, I have 2 sort of main programs. One is a breathing recovery program, so those with respiratory conditions and or anxiety. Because often people, as I said, who have anxiety also have dysfunctional breathing patterns. So this program is all about the functional day-to-day breathing, and I mix in mindfulness and movement as well into the program. And there is accountability, direction, community, tracking. I really enjoy doing programs with groups. I think it's really kind of fun to have that community aspect of it as well, but also one-to-one, of course. But yeah, by the end of the program, your symptoms should definitely be reduced. So you can, enjoy your life and more. And the second program I have is called a Breakthrough Breathwork program. So that's the more cathartic breathwork. But I start with the functional breathing portion as well, just to kind of create a solid base to then dive into that deeper work. And then we move to the cathartic right through breathwork, accessing altered states of consciousness, releasing blocks, lots of transformation happening there. I do corporate wellness trainings as well, which can be adapted. And I teach yoga. So lots of things going on. I'm going to start soon doing hopefully like monthly or maybe more than monthly breakthrough breathwork group sessions as well for those not in the program. Because as amazing it is to, do it really consistently, also really cool to do every once in a while as well. And I've been posting some meditations on YouTube. Also, it's just In-Bodied in YouTube. And then my website is in-bodied.com, In-Bodied. And then my Instagram is the same, except the dash is a period because Instagram doesn't allow dashes. And yeah, I would just say, really simple first step is noticing your breathing right now while you're listening to this podcast. Are you breathing through your nose, your mouth, chest, your diaphragm, hard, fast, cold, or slow? This is such a good starting point to just kind of feel into how your breathing is, what your body is doing.
I want to point out, since you mentioned that, I used to be a mouth breather, and I find since doing this podcast, being on camera, just being cognizant of myself, I don't want to look like I'm doing that. So I've tried to, use my nose, and now I do feel like I do it more automatic as opposed to using my mouth.
Constantly noticing how people are breathing, and I can't help it. I take the trolley sometimes, and I'm like, that person's mouth breathing. But then I notice them switch, like they'll be mouth breathing, and then they'll close their mouth, and they'll open their mouth again. And I'm like, oh, so fascinating. I think
maybe a weird kind of breath work they're doing.
Yeah, possibly. A lot of people just aren't aware. And then when you start to notice, you start to become aware of it, you start to change that habit for sure.
Thank you so much, Annelise, for sharing all of that. And I will be sure to link your website and your social medias, including YouTube and Instagram, in the show notes, and as well on my website at beyondthewheeze.ca/podcast. I do have one final question for you, Annelise, and I know you've listened to the podcast before. This is one I add at the very end of each episode, and I think this one pertains very well to you. So here it is. Whether you have asthma or not, every breath we take is a gift, a reminder of our resilience, our drive to keep going, and our power to define our own limits. With a single breath, you have the potential to move mountains and change the world. So with that in mind, again, I have one final question for you. If you had only one last breath, but with it the power to influence the world, what would your message be?
Yeah, I think it would be spend more time outside, moving your body, dancing. I love dancing. I think it is such a powerful modality. I want to bring it into my practice more, actually. But yeah, go dance outside, be present there, breathe consciously through your nose. I think we live in such a world that rushes us, and this feeling of constantly needing to be productive or doing something. But I think more of us need to remember that we are nature. We are not separate. And it really is imperative to our survival that we don't forget that. And then also, if you're struggling with your breathing, you're not alone. And there are people advocating for you, Josh included, obviously. And yeah, breathing is our lifeline, and we all deserve to breathe well.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Wheeze. I'm your host, Josh Rayholm. If today's conversation resonated with you, follow the show and share it with someone who might find it helpful. Guest bios and resources from this episode are available at beyondthewheeze.ca, and additional resources can be found in the show notes. Follow us on LinkedIn, where recap blogs are posted every Friday following new episodes, which are released every second Tuesday. You can also follow me on Instagram at the Asthma Runner. Remember, live with it, not in it. This is Beyond the Wheeze.